Find the exact value of the following expressions. So you got sine of cosine inverse 1/2. Here sine, cosine inverse. So we're going to work on inside first. Cosine inverse of 1/2 will give us an angle and we'll evaluate sine of that angle. So cosine inverse of 1/2 means cosine of which angle gives us 1/2. So what is this angle? Looking at the unit circle, so first quadrant or second quadrant, because cosine inverse lives in first or second quadrant, we get that theta is 60 degrees pi over 3. So this one is now sine cosine inverse of 1/2 is pi over 3. Now again from the unit circle, sine pi over 3 or sine 60 degrees has value √3 over 2. Okay, here in the next, cotangent of sine inverse of -1/2. So we're going to find the angle, then take cotangent of that angle. So sine inverse of -1/2. For sine inverse we can pull negative outside. So negative sine inverse of 1/2. Now we need to find the angle whose sine is 1/2. So sine of which angle is 1/2? So this angle is 30 degrees, pi over 6. Sine of pi over 6 is 1/2. So sine inverse of 1/2 is pi over 6. So we got cotangent of negative pi over 6. And we know that sine and tangent are odd functions. And so they are reciprocal. So cotangent is also an odd function, so negative can be pulled outside. So cotangent pi over 6. So negative, cotangent is a reciprocal of tangent. So if you have unit circle, you can look at cotangent is just x over y. Okay, go to the unit circle and you can find this. In the unit circle, pi over 6, somewhere here, it will be √3 over 2 comma 1/2. So x over y means √3 over 2 divided by 1/2 to cancel, √3 over 1. So this value is negative from here, √3. Okay, that's cotangent pi over 6. Or we could have figured out tangent pi over 6 and find its reciprocal, same thing. Cosecant of cosine inverse of this, so we're going to find the value of this first, which is an angle. So cosine inverse lives in 0 to pi. Okay, the angle should be in fact 0 to pi here. And when we have that angle, we evaluate cosecant of that angle. So cosine inverse of negative √3 over 2. So cosine inverse negative means in the second quadrant. Okay, and look at the unit circle. At some point you will see cosine means x coordinate. You will have somewhere negative √3 over 2. Okay, then look at that angle. That will be pi over 6. Okay, so this is cosecant. So this will be pi over 6. Okay, that's the angle pi over 6. We get negative √3 over 2. Now we need to determine the value of cosecant pi over 6. So cosecant, so negative √3 over 2 comma 1/2. So we got these two. Cosecant is reciprocal of sine. Sine pi over 6 is 1/2 from the same place. Okay, sine pi over 6 is 1/2, but cosecant is now reciprocal, means 2 over 1, just 2. Next, now sine of tangent inverse of -1. Okay, tangent inverse of -1, like sine inverse, we can pull negative outside, so negative tangent inverse of 1, so minus. Now we are trying to find an angle, find the angle in fact, whose tangent is 1. So tangent should be in the first quadrant. Tangent pi over 4 is 1. So tangent inverse of 1 is pi over 4. So negative pi over 4. So this is sine of negative pi over 4. And sine is an odd function. Odd function means negative outside. Sine pi over 4. Negative sine pi over 4. Look at the unit circle. So 45 degrees. Sine 45 degrees is root 2 over 2. Or you can write 1 over root 2. Same thing, and there's a negative sign. Final.